They do get you one thing, CC. They get you a target on your back, which is what the Eagles have right now. How much harder is it going to be for this Philadelphia team now that they have that Super Bowl win behind them last season? They got to go out and defend it.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. If you look at where they were last year, they'd had zero experience. I mean, they were a franchise in transition. Is Carson Wentz, is he that guy? Was he worth that draft pick? Their personnel department was changing. Howie Roseman was starting to take back over the team. Who is Doug going to be as a coach? Like, we didn't know all these things. So for them to be able to repeat, I think it's just easier once you have some experience. And if you do that without your primetime quarterback, without your franchise quarterback, going into his third year. So I think all those things, all the experiences that they went through, depending on each other, next guy up, that mentality, all those things work. The credibility that the coach has in the locker room to be able to speak to the guys, yeah, I believe all those things, you can use them moving forward, but you don't get anything from a banner. I mean, you don't get anything inspiration from looking at something one day, because it was all those little decisions that they made that led to them getting the championship. So I understand what Malcolm is saying. But, man, in NFL, and that's the exciting thing about it, this is not the NBA. Golden State don't have a lead on everyone. Our regular season, it is going to mean something. Every year in our divisions, Nick, we talk about how many times a team comes from last in their division and they win that division. And that is the mentality and the parity within the league, and Malcolm is right. But I do believe that what they went through, that would be like, okay, whatever Tom Brady's went through, it doesn't affect them as that experience, I believe, will help them moving forward.
I think it's extraordinary commentary by one of the most thoughtful and one of the most intelligent players we have in the league, in Malcolm Jenkins. And here's why. I think the experience absolutely can help them once they get towards the end of the season, if they're in a similar position, if they have a good record early. And, okay, guys, we know how important these late games can be. If they're back in the playoffs, all right, nothing is a bigger game than what we've already played. But it absolutely, and we've seen it happen before, there's a reason there's such a thing as a Super Bowl hangover. Typically, it's for the losing team, but sometimes for the winning team, where it is hard to get jacked back up to where you need to be each and every Sunday. And one thing that you've made a big impression on me on is listening to what guys say and taking them seriously. The Eagles, to a man last year, were adamant that the underdog mentality was a huge part of their success.
Yes.
They wore the masks. They talked about it at the parade. They sold them for charity. Well, that is gone forever now. Like, you can, every team tries to do the nobody believes in us, we're underdogs. You can't do that when you're the defending champs who are actually better equipped this year than last year. You didn't have John Elway retire. You actually got John Elway back from injury. Like, right. Your version of it.
Yes, a young John Elway.
A young John. So for all these reasons, like, that part, I do think that is removed from them. Also, on a very just factual basis, you have a harder road after having won the Super Bowl than the year before, because you won your division. You are now playing outside of your set schedule, the Vikings and the Rams, as opposed to second or third or fourth place in those divisions. One of the reasons teams can go last to first is that year after you finish last, you get 2 games against 2 other teams that finished last. Schedule-wise also, NFC East. Just unlucky draw this year.
Unlucky.
Draw the NFC South.
Yep.
They got 3 teams I think is good. In the AFC, who do you draw? The AFC South, one of the divisions that produced 2 playoff teams and has Luck and Watson coming back from injury. So for all those reasons, I do think it's a tougher road, but I think the experience, if they get through the early part of the season, the experience can pay dividends.
We'll break down what the team has and where they fit into their division in a second, but you talk about experience. What traps can having that experience, what can you fall into? Yeah, you have that experience. but also all of the teams have seen what you can do, what you're very good at. Is that part of sort of what hamstrings you a little bit?
Well, I think that listening to people, listening to the general public, you get more pats on the back. It's just a human condition. When you're out in public, people are going to say things to you. The availability for the Eagles to do public events, the amount of money that they have made. So you're hearing a lot of positive things in the community, but does that help you in trying to win this year's championship? No, because last year it wasn't that way. I wish if they can remember where they were when they left training camp, just a team trying to survive. They stormed through the first 2 months of the season. They need to get themselves back in position that they were in last year, that at the end of the season, every game that they played, it really meant something.
So now you have this Eagles team where you're not 100% certain if Carson Wentz is going to start. We found out that wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey may be missing 2 or 3 weeks. How much of a disadvantage does that put this Philadelphia Eagles team at the start of the season?
Well, the Jeffrey thing, I think, is significant. They lost Torrey Smith. Now, theoretically, they upgraded to Mike Wallace. But it also should be noted, Mike Wallace last year had 750 yards in Baltimore. He's also age 30 season, age 32 season, and going 9th year in the league. So how much of an upgrade will that effectively be? We also know that they lost their backup tight end. Now they drafted a tight end in the 2nd round. But there are, as far as your ability to move the ball vertically, I think Alshon's their best option. I think he's better than Nelson Aguilar. I think you saw they gave him a long-term extension at the end of last season. To me, that could be a significant early season loss.
And Alshon Jeffries works better with a speed receiver. The speed receiver, Mike Wallace, works better with a good slot receiver, which they have in Nelson Aguilar, and a good tight end, which they have in Ertz. But also, his speed works better with a big, physical possession receiver, who Alshon Jeffries is. So they are a team that, just like they finished last season, going forward, they won't have most of their frontline guys to start the season. Now, will the backup players step up the way Nick Foles did against the Vikings NFC Championship and in the Super Bowl? The way that we've seen the left tackle have to step up and to be able to play significant amounts of minutes. So will these players be able to do that? I think that they will be able to do that. But also, they got some players coming back. They got the middle linebacker, Jordan Hicks, coming back. People don't know his name, haven't spoken much about him. He is a very good football player. So the reason
Sproles will be back. So he hasn't played in a preseason game yet, but Sproles is an interesting weapon.
500 career catches that they have a guy coming out of the backfield. So they are a talented football team, Nick.
One thing on Alshon Jeffrey. I do want to see what he looks like when he comes back. He had his surgery in late February and this long season with the Super Bowl, and I get that a guy he injured himself last year's training camp. So he played all year with an injury. I understand why he wouldn't want to schedule a surgery for 2 days after the Super Bowl. Give yourself some time to relax and recuperate, especially after winning a championship. But this is a guy who was a star in this league in year 2. He was the guy the Bears drafted him to be in year 2 and has never recaptured that. He showed enough of that last season that the Eagles showed faith in him and gave him that extension. He's now not going to be ready, it would appear, for week 1. I'm interested to see the progression he makes, not only physically as far as health, but his ability to become his best self again, which we've only seen for fleeting moments in the league.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.